What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Drew and Chase Side by Side. I am Drew.
And I am Chase.
And this is a music podcast where we choose a year, we pick an album from that year, we each pick an album from that year and put them up side by side. We see if there's any similarities, any differences, what we like, dislike, and any interesting facts. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And now let's get into it.
All right, so for the first album, it's the debut album from Kanye West, The College Dropout, dropping in 2004 from Chicago. And then the second album we'll be talking about is another debut album by the group The Hold Steady, titled Almost Killed Me. And they're kind of another Midwest group, but they really formed out of Brooklyn. So New York, but yeah, let's go ahead and get going.
Let's get into it. So the first album we'll take a look into is Kanye West, The College Dropout, which did release February 10th, 2004. This was his debut album, and it did win a Grammy for Best Rap Album. It did win a few other awards as well, like throughout the year, but the Grammy kind of being the pinnacle of the award that he got. A local note, in 2009, the San Diego Union-Tribune ranked it number 4 in its the best album of the decade list. So I just thought that was pretty interesting, a little local connection. He had 5 singles released on the album, and I distinctly remember all of the videos vividly.
Right.
Like when I looked at the list of the of the videos, I was like, and the singles, I was like, yep, I remember all of these. But yeah, I thought the first song started out really well. We Don't Care. I thought it had a really good feel to it and had a good bounce to it. And yeah, I just thought it was a pretty strong start to the album. And another one that stuck out definitely was one of the singles, All Falls Down. Again, I remember the music video. It felt really soulful, and it was talking about how, in my opinion, how things were kind of changing as he was kind of developing and things like that. And I know before we were talking on this, you had mentioned, I believe it was I'll Fly Away, where he just kind of sampled a soul song.
Yeah, I forget which song it is, but yeah, it's just a little interlude, I guess, in between. But yeah, All Falls Down was really cool. Like the lyrical content, it's definitely very much about like, consumerism, being like addicted to retail and like kind of the whole idea of like spending money you don't necessarily have.
Yeah.
Like, kind of the whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality, for sure.
And then the fact that he was gaining more popularity, getting more money, he was able to spend money on these things, and then he was just kind of explaining the whole cyclical circle thing, how you can kind of get trapped in that thing. But I did like I'll Fly Away, and it was just kind of interesting because it was very soulful, had a real gospel feel to it. And then it's just interesting because we see where he's at today and how he has really taken on his faith and taken on that more gospel sound. But this was kind of an early glimpse into it, and then along with like Jesus Walks, which
Right.
was talking about other issues going on, but it was a very powerful song. It kind of was showing like just the struggle of the day to day, in my opinion, for what was going on.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And just to go back to All Fly Away, like I like how that transitioned into Spaceship, which is
Yes.
obviously like him, like, like blowing up or going into space. Like he just wants to get away. And again, in that song, he's kind of talking about, in the beginning, he's talking about like working at like the Gap or something in the mall. And like, I like the line where he's talking about like, they accused him of stealing, but then like when a black customer comes in, they're going to show off their token black employee And it's kind of like this thing where it's like a commodity almost, and like he's recognizing that and he's like calling it out, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
But then to transition from that into Jesus Walks, it's definitely like, obviously he's like had his faith for a long time, and he stands by it for sure, and he's putting it out there for everyone. And I like the line in that song specifically too, where he's like, I'm not trying to turn atheists into believers.
Yeah.
He's just trying to like say, this is what I feel, this is like my beliefs, this is I'm trying to prove a point that they say you can't rap about Jesus, but in the club next week, you're going to be singing
Jesus Walks.
And it did. It was a huge song.
Yeah.
And like, really, I remember it. I think I read something, he made 3 videos or 4 different music
so many
videos.
remixes and alternate versions and things like that. Yeah, and there was a lot of controversy because this was one of the first times in my recollection where somebody with just coming up but having a big platform kind of showcasing his faith like that and actually putting Jesus Walks in a hook and having it blow up, and everybody screaming it. But it's funny because you bring up that line, I'm not trying to turn atheists into believers. He recently says when he does it live now, he changes it because of his faith. He's like, I am trying to turn atheists into believers.
Which is like the message of the church, I guess, growing up in that background and stuff. It's like, you should be trying to spread the message. You should be trying to like convert people, I guess, but without, I guess, like he's doing it in a more artistic sense now. Probably, I mean, he might preach at his shows, I don't know. Don't watch.
I mean, he holds that Sunday gospel. I'm sure it's on hold now with everything going on, but he would host these Sunday church sessions and have musical artists come and just have this gospel feel. So, but I don't know what his preaching was there or anything, but it's just interesting to kind of see the beginning of his faith, or at least talking about it on a mass scale. But another song I really did like was Get 'Em High. It was a really cool song. It just felt like he was just in his zone, just rapping, and just kind of one of those just straight hip hop songs to me. And I always appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. That and the song before that, Never Let Me Down, with Jay-Z and Jay Ivy. Like that was one thing, like when I first like looked at the album, before I even played it, I just looked at like the songs, all the names and stuff, and who was on it. And I was like, for a debut album, he has some huge names on this album. And then so I did just like a quick search, and I guess like, he was a producer before and was like hooking people up with beats, and like and he had been kind of sitting on this album, working on it
since 99
for years is what I read. And so I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like he had connections and stuff, because I was like, most people just don't get like a debut and then you get all these like huge names already in the game, like to be features already. So I thought that was like interesting, because I just knew nothing about his like this album career, I guess. So
he's definitely, and then you kind of hear it skipping all the way to the end, but that ending song where in the middle third or whatever, he just tells the story of kind of everything that happened, which I thought was an amazing end to the album. He had that brief little like verse or two in there, but then he just told the story, which was just awesome. What I didn't like, we were talking about it a little bit. I didn't like all the skits. And then, that kind of leads into the new workout plan. I remember this video being released. I remember it being funny and everything, but man, I did not realize how sexual it was, especially being that young, obviously. But listening to it now, I was like, damn, this is just about just straight sex. And that was interesting. So that was one I wasn't too fond of, just not my thing. But it was still there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of people from what I read too. Just a quick like side note on that. A lot of people said like this was the one song on the album that didn't seem like it really fit.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in taking that into consideration, and yeah, to your point, I kind of it was a catchy song. Like, don't get me wrong, and
Yeah.
like I kind of remember the video being nostalgic of like an '80s workout
Exactly.
video and stuff. But yeah, it's like I just the whole, and I think it's kind of like satirical, and he's like kind of being sarcastic in it.
You're right.
And so like, but the whole idea of like, looks, like a woman's look is gonna get her a man with money. Like, that's just not something like I really think we need to do. And then to sexualize working out, like, I don't know. It's just those two things, like, I'm just not a big fan of. Like,
Exactly.
maybe when I was younger, I would have been like, oh, yeah, cool. But, like, he's talking about, like, eat salad, no dessert. Like, if you want to get a man with money. Like,
Yeah.
that's just not, like, I don't know. I think really like displaying good character, but again, I think there's a lot of satirical elements to it, and I think he's just kind of like playing on that. So it's no like.
I think you're right, because I did kind of get that feeling as well, but I just didn't notice it, obviously being that young and growing up, about how sexually it was. So listening to it this time, I was taken aback, a little surprised by it.
Right.
It was pretty funny. But I think that one led into Slow Jams.
Yeah,
which was just classic. It just Jamie Foxx and Twista. It was released as a single, had a video, everything. It was just smooth and
I mean, that one definitely had like kind of like a sexual undertone to it too, but it was more like about the relationship and stuff. So it's like, it's good, but yeah, it's just like the way that song builds, I think is great, because yeah, it's his verse, he kills it, and then it's like talking about he can't do it that fast.
I can't go any faster.
And then Twista just comes in and like slays his verse, and like just the whole song just had a great that song definitely brought me back to like, I think that came out when I was in 4th grade. And I just remember really liking it then, and then now I'm still like, it's a classic.
Yeah, it is a classic for sure. What else? I mean, School Spirit. That was a song I wasn't really feeling too much. Like I just I don't know. It just what was one again, I just feel like it was just kind of there. I guess it fits with the whole theme of the album, but to me it just didn't really do much to me. I did like the School Spirit skit too, and I liked how it was kind of being like a little sarcastic and all of that about how degrees will matter and all of that kind of stuff. But overall, I just didn't like that whole kind of section of the album.
It's like the whole like the Spirit skit 1, then the song skit 2, and then the little Jimmy skit. It's just kind of like a little too much, I guess, maybe.
Exactly.
But it does, like you said, fit the like the conceptual idea of the record and stuff, because I mean, he really did like, he's kind of saying that message of like, like you can still be successful without school. And like there are people that work their entire lives just getting degrees, or like are unsure of what they're doing and why they're in school and like what their goal is, and they're just going through it to either please their parents or just to like be there for the party or whatever. So it's like I kind of like that he's like poking fun at that. But it's just like it was, I don't know, a little too much for me, I guess. Like that many kind of in a row. So.
Exactly. I felt the same way. But another standout was Through the Wire. I believe this was our introduction to Kanye West. I could be wrong on that, but this is the first song I remember hearing and video I remember hearing. This was definitely my introduction to Kanye West. I thought it was a good song, had that great sample in it. Just a crazy story telling about, the accident that he got in and just kind of everything leading up to what was going on. I definitely thought it was a strong one.
Yeah, that's definitely same thing. I think the first song I heard from him, and I remember the video, and it's kind of like graphic because it was like post surgery or whatever from his accident and stuff. And I just remember it kind of, and it's like almost almost spoken word. Like, I mean, he's rapping and stuff, but like, yeah, he's like telling a story really well. And I think it, for that track to be that late on the album and it be that significant, it was pretty cool too. So,
yeah. I did like Family Business. It kind of had a more somber feel to it, but I liked how it was just telling a story about different aspects of family relationships and, you know, from cousins, aunts, you know, just the whole aspect of family and what goes on with it. And yeah, I did like that one. I did, yeah, it felt good to me. Yeah. Even though it kind of did have a more of a somber feel, but it did have that kind of upbeat little bit as well. But I thought it was a good, well-rounded song. And then we already kind of touched on it, but Last Call, I thought that was a great way to end it with just that ending story about how he kind of got signed and what he went through to kind of make that happen and the fallouts that happened and how close he was to certain deals. And then, you know, it was just it was an interesting but great way to kind of close out the album.
Yeah, and I thought the last note that I want to mention about it is like I thought it was interesting. I read something about I think John Legend is on a couple tracks on this album, and I think it was like the producer or not the producer because he produced the album and like I just want to say the beats and the production on it are so good.
Yeah,
like every song just like sounds so crisp and so like it just pops and stuff. But something with someone helping with the album, I guess. I don't know what his name was before John Legend, but maybe just John. I don't know. But he was like, no, you have a voice like a legend, so you're John Legend from now on. I guess Kanye told him that, and I guess
interesting.
I don't know if that's the true story or if that's just what this guy was saying or whatever, but I'm like, it seems like, a lot of like, you know, people surrounding it, like, you know, you have, like I said before, a lot of like big names on it. Common, Mos Def, Ludacris, Jay-Z, a couple
Talib Kweli,
and then
so many,
a couple others and stuff. I'm not sure who like Consequence and
G-Loc or G-Loc or whatever.
I don't know those two, but yeah, just like a lot of names and stuff like that that kind of like are still around and still like, you know, in the same like capacity that he is, like they all kind of like grew from it. I mean, Jay-Z, I guess it's different. He was already pretty big at this point, but I definitely thought it was cool, like to see like to have a debut like that and then be able to like keep progressing. I haven't followed his career at all. I know he always has a lot of kind of controversy surrounding him. But yeah, like I definitely want to check out the next album. Is it Late Registration?
Late Registration, yeah.
Yeah, and see like kind of how he follows up. And yeah, it'd be interesting to just check out his whole discography. Because it seems like he's always kind of reinventing himself.
Always,
just like doing what he wants to do, which is always like a cool sign for a good artist. So
yeah, I mean, I thought this album was really strong. Initially looking at it, seeing all the skits and the features and all that, I was a little hesitant. But knowing from what I've heard in the past that it is kind of one of his best albums and just being a debut and being like, I believe it was like 76 minutes, I was like, man, this is going to take a while to kind of get through. But honestly, it flew by. It went super quick to me and I really enjoyed it. So again, same thing. I'm definitely going to be checking out more of his discography. I haven't done too much diving into him, so it's gonna be interesting checking out more for sure.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when I first saw how long the album was. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be hard to get through a couple of times, like, and like really like try and pay attention to each song. But yes, to what you said, I thought it like flowed really well, and it doesn't feel like you're sitting there for an hour and 16 minutes or whatever, and like okay, it's running out for a minute and a half on this beat.
Yeah.
It's like it's constant and it transitions well, and overall really great album for sure.
Yeah, so let's get into the Hold Steady album.
Yeah, so the Hold Steady, this is their debut. So it's kind of from the ashes of Craig Finn, and his previous band was called Lifter Puller, and they were based out of like Minneapolis. And then the guitar player in the Hold Steady, Tad, was the bass player in Lifter Puller. So when that band kind of fell apart, Craig moved to Brooklyn for work, and then Tad came out a couple years later, if I'm correct. And then they started the Hold Steady. And this was their debut. This is like an interesting album because it's got a lot of like foreshadowing, I guess I would say. But yeah, it starts with
Hold on, a couple questions. So I heard that this was definitely like a concept album, and you can kind of tell because of the different characters that are kind of mentioned throughout.
Yes.
So these are just made up stories, or are they real characters, or what's that about?
That's the thing. So the Hold Steady, like this album, the follow-up, Separation Sunday, and even like later on, like Craig Finn, the main songwriter, has these reoccurring characters. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and it centers around real people and real like stories from partying and
Gotcha.
Drinking and stuff like that. I think from what he said, I don't think any one person is like one specific person, but
it's combined,
like an accumulation of different
Gotcha.
characters from personality. So yeah, like on their first couple albums, they center around Charlemagne, Gideon, Holly or Hallelujah, and then I think there's a girl named Mary or Bloody Mary like referenced in a couple songs, but it's kind of centered around those. And like there's some other characters too that come up reoccurring in like the first couple albums. So yeah, a lot of people say it is a conceptual album and stuff. And I don't know, like you can like listen to the song without it having to be conceptual, I guess, which makes it great because like I don't think like if you just jump into any song on this album, you're going to be like confused about what's going on. Each song can kind of stand on its own as well.
Definitely.
But when you put it together as a body of work, it's like he is referencing things,
multiple characters
and coming back to like ideas and stuff like that. So and then it starts with Positive Jam, which is like I think not conceptual, and that's why like when I was reading that it was like concept album. I'm like, well, it's starting with him just kind of going through the decades, talking about like different things that were happening
throughout history,
and getting to, I think he ends in the 80s or the 90s. I can't remember.
I think 80s.
Yeah, I think it just ends in the 80s. And then it goes into just like the big, like kind of like crescendo, like loud guitars and like epic kind of end to that song. And then it really starts their kind of like trademark sound with the swish, which is just like bar rock kind of punk kind of the big guitars, big guitar solos. And
I think this was our first look into his wordplay as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, he definitely has that like poetic
it just flows.
Yeah.
That's kind of how you can describe it. Just flows the way he does it. It has a rhythmic feel, even though he does rhyme a lot, but even when he's not rhyming, it has that rhythmic feel to it.
Yeah, and he uses a lot of references on this album. Like I was trying to count like how many, I forgot now, but like he references so many different like people in pop culture, and they're usually like music people or like just different things, but he's really good at like incorporating that, so it's like, oh, that's familiar, like even if you haven't heard that song, like I get what he's trying to say kind of thing. And then the next song, Bar Fruit Blues, again, it's just kind of another like banger. And then that's kind of where like I think like some of the story starts developing about like the girl
Yeah, I think this was the first time
being in the bars,
Yeah.
and it's like good to see you're still in the bars and you're a bar band and all that stuff. So it's kind of like, yeah, starting to tell the story a little bit more. And then, yeah, the next one too, most people are DJs. That's just like a great solo at the end of that song.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, and like, it kind of is like, that song goes into the next one really well, which is Certain Songs, because it's like people like to show off music to other people, like, oh, like, have you checked out this or that? And so it's like, I like that title. Most people are DJs. Like, I like the line, everyone's a critic and most people are DJs. And I think for him to say that in 2004, whereas now, like, literally everything is critiqued to such a high level.
Yeah.
Like, whether it's Yelp or, you go on any YouTube video and there's like people arguing about like their opinion being right or wrong or whatever. So I like that was being said even back then, kind of thing.
Way ahead of his time for sure. I mean, yeah, I liked both of those ones. What is it called? The DJ one?
Most people
are DJs, yeah. Just 16 years kind of ahead of his time, because now, like you were saying, everybody's a critic, and most people are DJs because of technology. And but I did have a question. Was he talking about just the like disc jockeys, like who just kind of press play and create playlists, or actual like DJs creating house music, electronic music, or whatever? Like, because that was a little hard to kind of decipher between that song, but
well, yeah, because that song's interesting, because he's kind of talking about like the party scene. He's talking about like jamming jet skis into the jetty and stuff like that. Like, I think he's just talking about partying, and then like, yeah, whether that be like a more club DJ or just like being at a party and you have that guy that's like
creating the playlist.
Yeah, okay.
And
so I think it kind of is centering around that idea.
Gotcha. Which is even more ahead of the time, because now everybody does that. Just look on your Spotify. Everybody creates a playlist, and and I did like what was it? In that song he has that line. Something about the packy.
Yeah, from the packy to the taxi to the club or something like that.
Yeah, would he get in trouble for that line today?
He might. I'm not sure. Yeah,
that just stood out to me, because I was like, oh, you can't say that today.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's what he's referencing, or if he's talking about like, someone like just packing, because I think he's talking about drugs. But yeah, I definitely could.
Because he was talking about the taxi, and, so just my observation on that. I just thought that was a little interesting. But I did like Certain Songs. It felt like, going through like memories and memories of music and describing different situations of kind of what was going on, and like you said, kind of sharing that with people and all of that.
Yeah, so looking at the lyrics to that, he says, working backwards from the doctor to the drugs, from the packy to the taxi to the cabbie to the club. So it's like, yeah, like when you do like look at it and think about New York and cab drivers and stuff like that,
exactly.
it might think, but I think what he's talking about is like someone smuggling the drugs.
Gotcha.
Just being like the pack guy, like I'm gonna pack my car full of these drugs and I'm gonna take it to the club essentially. Makes or whatever. Sense. So yeah, maybe now he would. Maybe
I just heard it and it stood out, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that line."
Right. Yeah, that's funny, because just listening to them for so long, like and knowing their content and like what they're about, like that didn't necessarily cross my mind.
Yeah. But I didn't quite understand the song Knuckles.
Yeah. I just want to touch on the one before that, Certain Songs. Yeah. I think that's a great break on the album, because it starts so like just like from positive jam, starting that build, and then those next couple songs are just like thrashing, and then Certain Songs is kind of the more like piano. It kind of like is reminiscent of like Springsteen, and he's talking about like certain songs getting like scratched into our souls, which like I really believe, like especially in your earlier like, late teenage, early 20s kind of year, it's like those are kind of the songs that stick with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, he's referencing all these like Billy Joel, Dashboard by the Meatloaf song, and like a couple other ones. And then I've always liked the line, and he uses this line again later on in an album down the road. But he's like, and the hard drugs are for the kitchen workers and the bartenders' friends.
Yeah.
And it's just like, when I, worked in kitchens, like I used to really like that line.
Yeah.
And it was very relatable.
It definitely made me think about the old kitchen days when I would work at the places I worked at. Not that I ever partook in anything like that, but seeing it around for sure. I definitely, related to that line for sure.
Yeah, and so going into Knuckles, that song's a little interesting because he's throwing in all these references from, I think Freddie Knuckles was like a DJ or something, maybe like a scratching DJ or something. But then he's doing all this wordplay and stuff like that. And he's kind of talking about drugs and like partying because he's talking about like, there's wars going on in the Middle West, and then there's wars going down in the Midwest with like drugs and the war on drugs and all of that.
That's what I'm like. It seemed like he was just talking about drug dealers, the addicts, and also who is kind of creating the drugs.
Yeah,
and just kind of dealing with that whole process.
And then it breaks down and he starts talking about like the guy with the spiderweb tattoos and like having the spiders trapped inside, and then later on he's like, I lied, like so it's like it's a little like confusing what he's exactly talking about, but I definitely think it's just about like drugs and like getting caught up in that whole kind of scene for sure.
I did like Hostile Mass. Is that a city?
It's actually not a real city.
Okay.
And so that's the other thing. That's where like the whole city, they kind of like center around a couple different places. You'll hear them talk about like Massachusetts. They'll talk about Ybor City a lot, and then they'll talk about like St. Paul and Minneapolis.
So those two are real, obviously.
Yeah, but so he went to school in Massachusetts.
Okay.
So he left Minnesota and actually went up there, and I don't know what university or what college he went to, but so I think he just like there's a part of him that's there, so he likes to reference, and I think where he was like a college party town, so it was like I think some of these characters that he's referencing come from that time.
Yeah.
And maybe he just didn't want to name drop a specific place. Yeah. But I think in that song he actually does reference like Lynn, Massachusetts, which is a real place.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know why he chooses not to
pinpoint certain. Yeah. But maybe that just keeps up the kind of allure of the characters and the story, and so you can never pinpoint it to just this one. Oh, he's talking about this person or whatever. So kind of keeps it a little bit vague. Yeah, but exactly. I did like that song. It kind of had a big sound to it. Again, he kind of has his clever wordplay and lyrics, and it just felt like this was their sound for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and then the next two songs, Sketchy Metal and Sweet Pain, I think they're both great songs, but the two like flat kind of spots on the album.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I had to replay those ones a couple of times because I kind of kept losing focus a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm a huge Hold Steady fan. Like I don't think even those songs are bad songs.
No, not bad
at all. But yeah, like I think they do fall a little bit flat. And then I mean, looking at your notes, you were listening to the extended one.
Yeah.
Because I only have the vinyl which ends on Killer
on 10?
Parties.
Okay, yeah. No, that's fine. I wasn't sure what
I mean, I've listened to all the other songs
Yeah.
plenty of times, but I
Yeah,
have
no,
not
that's completely.
But I think Killer Parties is a great way to end the album.
Yeah.
And I like how it does tie back almost to Positive Jam in the sense where it's like, you know, now we're here in the United States, kind of modern times. Like, we learned about Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
We learned about Philly. Like, all these places we've kind of partied and stuff like this. And, you know, it's just kind of this weird transcendent, like, vibe in that song. Because it's like, I think it only has the one verse. And then it just kind of repeats. But just
exactly, yeah.
The song kind of builds and stuff. And just, like, it's very reminiscent of, you know, those parties I used to have in high school where it was like, I'm pretty sure we partied. I don't really remember. Like,
I don't remember exactly.
I blacked out or I left at one point and I woke up and I'm kind of like trying to put the pieces together. So I think that really like captures that feeling, and I really like think they do it well. And like, yeah, just overall it's just like such a good debut for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the next like 3 albums basically until like Stay Positive, they almost just keep getting better, which is crazy to say because this is such a great debut. So it's like, it shows like, I think they were still more in that raw figuring out their true identity and sound. And then like they just keep building on it and just, you know,
that's what I'm saying. You kind of got glimpses of it here for sure. And then that's why I said like Hostile Mass, I felt like they kind of really, that was one of the ones that reminded me of like Stay Positive or that kind of sound, you know? So, I mean, I guess that's kind of maybe the link between the two. They're both their studio debut albums and both really solid. Yeah. Both really strong albums.
And kind of like what Kanye says in the one song, it's like, you know what the Midwest is? Young and restless. I think that line is kind of exactly what the whole Hold Steady album is about.
The feel, yeah.
Because it's all about like being restless, partying, doing drugs, like trying to figure out your way in this life. And another thing, not so much on this Hold Steady album, but Craig Finn is a very religious dude himself. And in other songs, he does bring a lot of like references to salvation and faith,
Savior
and so I think that's another connection that's
interesting.
Didn't even like when you would pick these two albums you wouldn't think there would be any similarities. And then like I know I've showed you some other like of Craig's stuff where he is much more like influenced by the kind of like Midwest rap style. I mean, you can hear it here, but even more in some other songs and stuff. Definitely. Where he has that kind of like I always forget it, Sage Francis and what's
Atmosphere
vibe to his. And I guess they used to play shows like they were like only in the Midwest could you have like Lifter Puller or the Hold Steady and then like Atmosphere on the same bill.
That's crazy.
And so like just to have that kind of like, even though the Hold Steady is not a hip hop band at all, like
you can hear it though. You can hear the influence or whatever that Midwest sound is that kind of cuts through all of those artists. For sure.
Exactly. And so, and then to being that Kanye's from Chicago, which isn't far from any of that, it's like it's all interestingly enough connected in a bizarre kind of way, which is cool.
Definitely. So I think that's it. Any other final notes?
No,
we're good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, peace.
Cheers.